Remember when a steel mill welder could clock out, throw on her dance gear, and somehow spin her way into one of the biggest movies of the 1980s? Released by Paramount Pictures in April of 1983, Flashdance followed Alex Owens, played by Jennifer Beals, a young woman balancing blue-collar grit by day and big dance dreams by night. Opposite her was Michael Nouri as Nick Hurley, the wealthy steel mill owner who somehow turned workplace dynamics into a full-blown 80s romance. And the movie didn't just tell a story. It launched a look, a sound, and an entire generation of people who genuinely believed that they were one training montage away from greatness. Behind all the sparks, the sweat, and slow-motion spins, this movie was considerably messier than it looked on screen. And today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Flashdance that you probably never knew. And stick around for number one, because by the end of this, you'll realize that Alex Owens, the gritty, authentic one-woman phenomenon at the center of the whole film, was actually put together from at least 4 different people. But before we get into it, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps YouTube put this in front of more classic movie fans who might want to see it. All right, let's head to Pittsburgh. Number 15, Alex Owens had many faces on screen. That powerhouse performance at the center of Flashdance was not one person. It was actually a small team. Jennifer Beals handled the acting and some of the lighter movement. Everything more demanding would get outsourced. French dancer Maureen performed nearly all of the jazz and contemporary choreography. Gymnast Sharon Shapiro handled the aerial flip. The breakdance spin in the final audition came from a 16-year-old boy, Richard Crazy Legs Colon of the Rocksteady crew, who shaved his legs, underarms, and mustache and put on a wig and tights and pulled off the move because no available female double could. Paramount actively tried to bury all of this. Maureen, who was doing most of the actual dancing, received 0 credit in the film. She was reportedly told that her involvement was being hidden because the studio didn't want to ruin the illusion. All right. When the truth finally broke, largely because her name was missing from the credits, it turned into a genuine controversy that hurt Jahan's career. Beals has publicly credited her doubles in interviews over the years. The original marketing, though, did quite the opposite, selling the performance as one singular breakout talent. Number 14, the film sent a generation running to dance studios. In 1983, dance movies were not new territory. Saturday Night Fever made millions of Americans point at the floor like they were solving geometry in 1977. Fame convinced a generation in 1980 that you could just randomly start dancing in the street without consequences. The genre, it certainly had an audience. Flashdance supercharged it. The film fused dance, sweat, and industrial grit into a single package that looked effortlessly cool. And audiences responded by attempting to become Alex Owens en masse. Dance school enrollment spiked across the country. But the demand wasn't for traditional ballet. People wanted jazz, contemporary, and the athletic high-energy style on display in the Maniac montage. And then came the leg warmers. Oh, the leg warmers. Originally a practical piece of gear, professional dancers would wear them to keep their muscles warm to avoid cramping between routines, but they were repurposed overnight into a fashion requirement. Millions of women who had never set foot in a dance studio would buy pairs. They showed up in gyms, in malls, in grocery store lines, really anywhere that a pair of legs could reasonably be. For a brief moment in the 1980s, millions of people genuinely believed all they needed was leg warmers and a nice montage. Number 13, a dance movie soundtrack dethroned Thriller at number 1. This one sounds made up, but it's not made up. By the summer of 1983, Michael Jackson's Thriller had been sitting at number 1 on the Billboard 200 for 17 consecutive weeks. The album wasn't dominating the charts so much as occupying them, a cultural event that showed no signs of moving for anyone. On June 25th of 1983, the Flashdance soundtrack walked up and took the top spot anyway. It held the position for 2 full weeks before Thriller clawed its way back. Only 2 albums dethroned Thriller during its first run at number 1. Flashdance and The Police's Synchronicity, which arrived a month later. Footloose would do it again the following year, making dance movie soundtracks the only thing besides Sting that could reliably knock Michael Jackson off the top. The engine driving all of this were the 2 number 1 singles. Flashdance, What a Feeling, performed by Irene Cara, and Maniac, performed by Michael Sembello. Both of the songs colonized radio, MTV, and roughly every cassette deck in the country. The soundtrack went on to sell over 20 million copies worldwide. Number 12, Maniac was originally about a cat-killing serial killer. Maniac is rooted into cultural memory as workout music. Sparks, sweat, spinning in a chair. If you close your eyes, you can probably hear the chime of the bridge already. But it was originally written about a guy who kills cats and nails them to the floor. What? Songwriter Dennis McCoskey had gotten the idea after watching a news report about a serial killer and jotted the concept down on the spot, as one apparently does. He took it to Michael Sembello, and the two of them needed more lyrics, so Mikowski rented the 1980 horror film Maniac, which happened to share the title. The original chorus went, "He's a maniac, maniac, that's for sure. He'll kill your cat and nail it to the floor." What? Yeah, try cutting that against footage of a woman training for ballet school. The demo ended up on a tape that got sent over to music supervisor Phil Ramone, who was assembling songs for Flashdance. Director Adrian Lyne heard it and latched onto a two-tone chime in the bridge. He later described it as bing bong, bing bong, bing bong, and built the entire workout sequence around that sound. Now, one problem did remain, though. The song was still textually about a homicidal maniac with strong feelings about household pets. Ramone went back to Sembello with the obvious ask: drop the horror angle and rewrite it so it belonged in a dance movie rather than a criminal investigation.
Big hit song Maniac calls me up, says, "You know, that song was written for our movie."
Sembello obliged. The Maniac killer became a maniac on the floor, dancing like she's never danced before. That one fits a little better. It's the same beat, same chime, completely different subject matter. I mean, PETA, they would have had a field day. Number 11, the chair scene was filmed in freezing water over and over again. The chair, the spotlight, the chain gets pulled, the water comes down, and Alex Owens is soaked in what is arguably the most replayed 3 seconds of the entire film. It looks effortless on screen, but it was not effortless to shoot. Adrian Lyne later admitted that he struggled with the entire sequence. The water was heavy enough that the crew was genuinely worried it may break the dancer's neck. The lighting was a disaster. Lyne kept trying to shoot it against a white background, but he then realized eventually that sparkling water needs darkness behind it to actually sparkle. Once he figured that out, every cue had to be timed so the lighting rig, the water release, and the choreography lined up exactly. Getting the scene greenlit in the first place was its own circus. Lyne had to physically pitch the idea to about 30 executives sitting on bleachers in a soundstage, while he stood at the bottom, winding a yellow garden hose around a stand-in, trying to mime out what he had in mind. The room was, by his own account, infinitely skeptical. And that is how one of the most recognized visual moments of the decade got greenlit. One of the most iconic moments of the whole decade, right? It started with a guy just holding a garden hose and hoping it made sense. Number 10, the strobes on set were so aggressive that crew walked off. A 1983 dance movie ended up with a reputation usually reserved for modern video games, the kind that come with seizure warnings on the box. The Maniac sequence, Alex's home workout montage, all sparks and silhouettes and cuts, was lit with strobes flashing 6 times a second, reportedly synced directly to the film camera. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, this may have been one of the first uses of camera-sync strobes in a major motion picture. Legitimate technical innovation, but also a human endurance test. The flashing was aggressive and sustained enough that crew members had to leave the set during filming, not because of the schedule or the hours, but because they couldn't physically stay inside the light anymore. The afterlife is the part that sticks. Decades later, the Maniac sequence still gets cited as a textbook example of the rapid flash visual style that can trigger seizures in people with photosensitive epilepsy. Modern broadcast and gaming standards exist partly to prevent exactly the kind of imagery that Adrian Lyne was building a movie around in 1982. He got his music video aesthetic, and decades of seizure researchers got a case study. Number 9, the script was still being written after the cameras rolled. If Flashdance has ever felt to you more like a 96-minute music video than a movie with a traditional story, there's actually a reason for that. The script was a problem that nobody could quite solve. The screenplay had been bouncing around Hollywood for years. Tom Headley sold the original draft to Casablanca in 1980 for $300,000 plus 5% of the net. It moved to Polygram and then landed at Paramount, where it sat in turnaround for 2 years doing nothing. Don Simpson resigned his executive job at Paramount specifically to produce the movie himself, partner with Jerry Bruckheimer, and hired Joe Esteras to rewrite Headley's script. Those rewrites, running right up to the start of production in October of 1982, were what finally got Paramount to greenlight the film. Even then, finding a director was its own circus. David Cronenberg turned it down because he thought he would destroy the movie. Brian De Palma turned it down to go make Scarface instead. Adrian Lyne turned it down twice himself, calling the story a little silly before finally agreeing on the third pass, partly because he wanted the studio's goodwill for his real passion project, the erotic drama 9.5 Weeks. Since the story was thin and the lead wasn't a trained dancer, Lyne leaned into his TV commercial background. Music video montages, striking lighting, sparks, slow motion, sweat, just pure visual energy. Critics clocked it immediately. Roger Ebert put the film on his most hated list. Variety described it as essentially 96 minutes of MTV. Paramount itself was nervous enough that before the film ever hit theaters, the studio quietly sold off 25% of the rights to outside investors. A full quarter of the picture handed off while the studio moved its chips towards something else. Then, audiences showed up and ignored every word of it. Flashdance pulled in over $94 million domestically. Third highest grossing film of 1983, behind only Return of the Jedi and Tootsie, and crossed $200 million worldwide. That 25% that Paramount had so sensibly unloaded was now a significant pile of money walking straight into someone else's account. Number 8, Flashdance stole its whole look from Bob Fosse. The reason that Flashdance works on screen, the rapid cuts, the body parts in isolation, the camera diving into the dancer instead of stepping back to watch, well, none of that was invented by Adrian Lyne. It was lifted, almost beat for beat, from Bob Fosse. Now, Fosse had been doing this since 1969. Sweet Charity, Cabaret, all that jazz. He tore up the Fred Astaire rulebook that said you keep the dancer in full frame and then let the choreography speak for itself. Fosse cut into close-ups, shot dancers from below, fragmented bodies into hands and hips and feet, and built the rhythm in the editing bay instead of on the stage. Dance circles called it Fosse time. Now, here is the part that should sting. Fosse used those techniques as deliberate craft, a comment on alienation, on show business as exploitation, on how the camera turns performers into parts. There was a thesis underneath it. Flashdance grabbed the same toolkit for a much simpler reason. The lead just couldn't dance, and rapid cuts were the only way to fake the choreography. Dance historians have flagged the Maniac sequence specifically as a textbook lift of Fosse's editing language. A genuine artistic innovation got repurposed as a workaround, and then went on to power 1,000 imitators that kept the cuts and quietly threw out the meaning. Ain't that Hollywood? Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this one, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't vanish from our storyline halfway through like an uncredited body double. Oh, and drop a comment below. What's the first thing that you think of when you hear Flashdance? The music, the sweatshirt, or the chair? All right, enough time at the factory. Let's book it to the stage. Number 7, half of Hollywood passed on the movie before anyone said yes. Kira Sedgwick was a teenager, sitting in a Flashdance audition when Adrian Lyne picked up a phone call mid-read. She turned to him and snapped, "You are not going to answer that phone call. I'm auditioning for you." She did not get the part, partly because she had ignored her agent's advice to wear a leotard and showed up in a miniskirt and heels, and partly because telling the director to hang up the phone is, generally speaking, not a winning move. Sedgwick has since said that she would never do that today. At the time, she was 16 and unbothered. Half of Hollywood was in a similar boat. Before Flashdance became a cultural event, the script was getting passed around like a punchline. The lead came down to 3 finalists: Jennifer Beals, Demi Moore, and Leslie Wing. How Beals actually won depends entirely on which version of the story you trust. Both are extremely Hollywood. Version 1. Paramount president Michael Eisner had female secretaries at the studio watch the screen tests and vote for their favorite. Or version 2, courtesy of screenwriter Joe Esteras, holds that Eisner gathered around 200 of the most macho men on the Paramount lot, meaning Teamsters, Grips, Gaffers, and asked them which of the 3 actresses they would most want to sleep with. Either way, Beals won. The male side had its own circus. A completely unknown Kevin Costner auditioned for Nick Hurley and got paid $200 to lie in a bed next to Beals during her screen test. He didn't get the role. Gene Simmons of Kiss was offered it and turned it down because it conflicted with his demon persona. Pierce Brosnan, Robert De Niro, Richard Gere, Mel Gibson, Tom Hanks, and John Travolta were all reportedly considered before the part went to Michael Nouri. Number 6, the star of the summer went back to college in the fall. When Flashdance was turning Jennifer Beals into a global superstar, Beals was a Yale undergraduate trying to get back to her studies. The audition that got her the role is its own short story. Beals arrived for her screen test having lost all her luggage on the flight, and according to Adrian Lyne, she had slept outside in a park the night before. Lyne was instantly taken with her anyway and rushed the footage to producers Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson with the pitch. "You've got to see this girl. She's marvelous." She had already been at Yale when she got cast. She deferred a term to film Flashdance. The movie came out in spring of 1983, and she went straight back to school for her sophomore year. She turned down major film offers, including Joel Schumacher's St. Elmo's Fire, specifically so she could stay in school. She later told the Virginian Pilot that her agents warned her that she was throwing away her career and potentially millions of dollars. Her reasoning was that she would only get one chance to be in school with her peers, and acting would still be available to her later. The only other film that she made during her college years was The Bride in 1985 with Sting. shot during a summer break. She graduated with honors in 1987 with a BA in American Literature. While the world was chasing fame, she just went back to class. Number 5. The two leads were 18 years apart in age. The central romance in Flashdance was not a small age difference. It was 18 years. Jennifer Beals was 18, turning 19 during filming. Michael Nouri was 36, turning 37 by the end of the shoot. IMDb trivia to this day notes that Beals was literally half his age at the time. In 1983, none of this was a headline. Critics were too occupied arguing over the thin plot to clock it. The age gap is only half the issue, too. Nick's not a stranger that Alex meets at a coffee shop. He's her boss at the steel mill. He's also a wealthy divorced mill owner, and she's a teenage welder on his payroll chasing dance school. At one point, he uses his influence to get her an audition without asking her first. A beat that played as a grand romantic gesture in 1983, and today reads more like a life decision being made on someone else's behalf today. Adrian Lyne himself, looking back at the film at its 40th anniversary, acknowledged that the dynamic doesn't quite play the same way now. He talks about Beals being only 17 or something at the time, and her vulnerability being part of why audiences forgave the setup. Now, audiences in 1983, they saw a romance, but today, it plays a lot more like a power dynamic with a soundtrack. Number 4, the real woman who inspired Alex Owens was paid $2,300. The character of Alex Owens was a composite drawn primarily from Maureen Marder, a Toronto woman who worked construction during the day and danced at night at a club called Gimlet's. Screenwriter Tom Headley, a former editor at Toronto Life magazine, knew Marder and the dancers at Gimlet's personally and built the story around their actual lives. A second Toronto dancer, Gina Healy, also contributed to the composite. Marder signed a general release on December 6th of 1982. The exact figures on the document, which became part of the legal record 3 decades later, $2,300. No royalties, no back end, just a flat check, a signed release, and a thank you on the way out the door. Healy reportedly received a similar deal. The movie went on to make more than $150 million in domestic box office. 20 years later, the wound got salt in it. Jennifer Lopez, who had started her own career as a fly girl dancer on In Living Color, clearly had the movie in her bones. While she released her 2003 single, I'm Glad, with a music video that wasn't so much inspired by Flashdance as it was a shot-for-shot tribute. The chair, the water, leg warmers, the audition, Lopez essentially condensed the entire plot into 4 minutes of choreography. Marder watched it and then sued. She went after Lopez, Sony, and Paramount, trying to establish a copyright interest in the underlying story. In June of 2006, the Ninth Circuit ruled against her. That 1982 release had, legally speaking, given away everything, a conclusion that the judges reached while acknowledging on the record that the deal appears to be unfair. Number 3, the movie about a woman who couldn't dance became a stage musical. Now here's a sentence that should not exist. Flashdance, the movie famous for hiding the fact that the lead couldn't dance, was turned into a stage musical where the lead has to dance live 8 shows a week in front of a paying audience. Flashdance the musical premiered in the UK in 2008 and went on to tour internationally for years, with productions running through the UK, the West End, multiple European countries, and a full North American tour in 2013. The stage version added new songs, expanded the romance, and pumped up the steel mill subplot. But the spine, it's all the same. Welder by day, dancer by night, audition at the end. The kicker is the casting requirement, where the film could lean on 3 different body doubles and aggressive editing to fake the choreography. Theater? Yeah, it doesn't offer that kind of luxury. Every actress cast as Alex Owens has to actually deliver the jazz, the contemporary work, and the live version of the chair sequence, water and all, with no cuts to hide behind. A movie built around the impossibility of finding one performer who could do everything became the property that requires exactly that every single night. Number 2, the off-the-shoulder sweatshirt was a laundry accident. Now, one of the defining fashion looks of the entire decade, that oversized gray sweatshirt hanging off of one shoulder, started its life as a clothing disaster that Jennifer Beals accidentally inflicted on herself. Now, long before Flashdance existed, Beals had a favorite gray sweatshirt from high school. She left it in the dryer on high heat for too long and shrank it into oblivion. The neck hole tightened to the point where her head could no longer fit through it. Rather than throw it out, though, she grabbed a pair of scissors, cut the collar off, and then kept wearing it around the house. Then she wore it to a wardrobe fitting for Flashdance. Director Adrian Lyne saw it and immediately wanted it in the movie. Costume designer Michael Kaplan, who also designed the costumes for Blade Runner, took the DIY sweatshirt and then refined it for the camera. In Beals' own words, Kaplan just made it cooler and better. The finished version ended up in the film and on the poster, and once Flashdance hit theaters, the look caught fire. Beals has said that for a stretch there, she couldn't walk down a street without spotting someone wearing a cutoff sweatshirt. A high school laundry mishap became the dominant casual aesthetic of the mid-1980s. Costume department, entirely optional. Number 1. The soundtrack that changed how Hollywood sold movies. Now, Flashdance walked into the 1984 awards season and walked out with a sweep. Flashdance, What a Feeling, written by Giorgio Moroder, Keith Forsie, and Irene Cara, won the Oscar for Best Original Song, beating Maniac, meaning the film was nominated against itself. Cara also picked up a Grammy for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance, and the song collected a Golden Globe along the way. The Academy and Roger Ebert were apparently watching different movies, but the trophies were not the legacy. Flashdance quietly rewrote how studios sold films. Before 1983, soundtracks supported movies. Paramount and Casablanca Records figured out something else. Released the singles weeks before the movie hits, and MTV becomes a free advertising arm. Maniac and What a Feeling colonized radio and music television before most audiences had any idea what Flashdance even was. By the time the film opened, the songs were already hits. The songs were the trailer. That template went everywhere. Footloose ran the same playbook the next year. Top Gun did it again in 1986 with Take My Breath Away and Danger Zone, Dirty Dancing, The Bodyguard, every glossy soundtrack-driven hit of the late 80s and early 90s. All of them followed the blueprint a thin little dance movie laid down. The biggest accident in Flashdance wasn't casting a non-dancer in the dance movie, it was figuring out that you could sell the soundtrack first and then let the movie ride on its coattails. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird and wild facts about Flashdance. Which one surprised you the most? Well, drop it in the comments and share this with a friend who still cuts the collars off their sweatshirts. And don't forget to ring that bell because it helps to make sure that others enjoy these deep dives into your favorite classics. Until next time, what a feeling. This is Remember When.